We're here at the farm show and we're talking a little bit of corn agronomy, and we're joined by Ken Currah of Pride Seeds. Ken, tell us a little bit about this crop, what you're seeing out there, what farmers need to be thinking about as we go forward, and overall crop condition.
Okay, no, I'll be happy to do that, Bern. So basically for my territory, which is London to Niagara, and then the Highway 7 corridor from the GTA over towards the Stratford-Exeter area, I'm seeing quite a variable corn crop, but overall I think it's going to be a fairly satisfying corn crop. The last 5 weeks has certainly been interesting because for a lot of areas it's been a dry August. I know certainly around the Woodstock area it was a very dry August. The story this year, I think, in overall corn yields is really going to come down to roots, or in most cases lack thereof. Stock quality is going to play into it to some degree. Nitrogen management, I think, is really going to play into it, and to predicate the nitrogen management discussion really is all about, again, a lack of roots to get nitrogen into the plant, and then we go back to a wet June and wet early July for most areas, anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks of saturated conditions, and really wreaked havoc on what are normally sound nitrogen practices to fertilize a corn crop. So if I drive around my zone, I see corn like this behind me on really nice loam ground is hanging in there over the last 2-3 weeks since it turned hot at the end of August, and again 2 days of heat here recently for the show. Really hanging in there. The bottom leaves are just starting to attrition off, but the ears are still upright and that grain is still filling. Metabolism of the plant is still creating yield within that ear and within those kernels. I go to other areas and I see plants firing up from the bottom towards the ear leaf. That's the corn plant's natural way to defend itself from drought stress or lack of fertility, to try to finish off and make that grain. I think in some of those areas, particularly the clay areas, we're going to see at the end of the day we'll realize that we probably lost a lot of nitrogen contribution to that crop just from the ponding or constant saturation in June and July, and that's really showing in the crop now. Stock quality is an interesting one. In those areas where you see corn plants really losing their health in a hurry, particularly if the ears are starting to droop down against the stalk at what seems like a premature stage, at full dead or just at quarter milk line, you might want to watch your stock quality in those fields, and that's as simple as a pinch test on the lower 2 or 3 nodes of the stalk to see if they're still firm and going to hold that plant upright into harvest in October and early November. That stock quality can degrade in a big hurry, and those stressed out areas, whether it's drought or lack of fertility or lack of roots or all three, those stressed out areas are going to be the areas that could lose stock quality first. So overall, my impressions of the corn crop in my zone, as I said earlier, it's going to be overall a pretty satisfying corn crop for most growers. I think certainly compared to 2012, where we were so dry for so long and that set us back in some areas, it overall should be a pretty good crop. Some of the issues I mentioned, whether it's yield losses due to standability issues, or maybe premature shutdown from a lack of fertility and some of the drought stress where we lose some test weight, those issues will be out there. They'll be somewhat isolated, but in certain areas of fields, certain geographies where some of the soil conditions aren't quite as good, we'll see some of those issues. But overall, I think it's going to be a pretty good crop here. In terms of crop progression, to me it's right on schedule. If you look at Ontario heat unit accumulation, it's more or less right on normal at this point in the season. So given our generally May 4th to May 20th corn planting window this year, give or take a couple days, we're right on schedule, and we should proceed towards hopefully a normal, naturally induced black layer maturity at the end of September or early October in the absence of a killing frost, and hopefully a productive and safe harvest beyond that.
We're at the Outdoor Farm Show here in Woodstock, and over the last couple of days we've had a great opportunity to meet growers right across Ontario. And a lot of the questions that growers are asking us is, what stage is my corn at, and what's going to happen with a frost at this stage? Most of the corn in Ontario is probably just started to dent or is down to maybe 0.5% milk line. When it starts to dent, the kernel moisture is probably right around that 55%. And a killing frost at this stage, we could lose up to 25% of the yield. And by killing frost, we mean temperatures that are 0 degrees for several hours, or if it gets down to -2 or lower for just a shorter period of time. At that stage, that's going to shut the plant down, and we could see some severe yield losses up to 25%. At that stage, at that dent, we're still about 3 weeks till we hit physiological maturity or black layer. Once we hit 50% milk line though, where 50% of that kernel is filled with starch and dry matter accumulation, killing frost at that stage only means we're going to lose about 10% yield loss. So once we hit that 50% milk line, we're pretty well in that home stretch, and then from that stage we're about 10 days to 2 weeks till we hit black layer. One of the things to do at black layer is get out and assess your stock integrity. It's a great time to go through the field and with a simple push test, just be able to see, is there any concerns with any sorts of diseases, with any of the roots or stalks, just to make sure that you're maximizing your harvest and making sure that you're getting the full yield you can. And that's a great test just to do after that black layer. At black layer, once you hit physiological maturity, we're about 30 to 35% moisture. And from that stage, we're going to lose between 1/2 and 3/4% moisture per day.
So the corn crop in southwestern Ontario this year looks strong once again. A lot of the yield estimates out there are showing above average yield potential out there right now. Some of the challenges that we are facing though at this point is corn development. It does seem a little bit slower than a year like last year and even some of the long-term averages. Obviously last year in 2012 was an exceptional year for heat, but this year it has been a little bit more gradual in corn development. So a lot of corn out in the countryside should look very similar to this. So we're getting corn, the corn cob I have right here is almost full dent, and so milk line should be retreating pretty quickly, which means that we're about 22 days away from physiological maturity and therefore 100% of the yield that you have in that field. So you pop this corn open and it does look like it's so fully dented, like I said, and about a third milk line that we're starting to see develop here. So yeah, about in that 20-day range for development. Of course that depends on where you are geographically, but it gives you a rule of thumb to go by. A couple of things to maybe monitor as we get closer to harvest is stalk strength. We are seeing some fields out there that lost a bit of nitrogen throughout the course of the year. High amounts of rain either denitrified some nitrogen or caused some leaching down. And so some corn out there did suffer from nitrogen losses. So what they're doing is they're taking resources from their stalk and leaves and putting it into the ear, which is great. They have their priorities figured out, but that could be at the expense of the stalks, right? And so late season stalks could be something to monitor. Ear molds could be something to keep in mind as well this fall. We have had conditions this year that could help develop some ear molds, and right about now, mid-September to the end of September is when those will start popping up. And so something to keep in mind from a grain quality standpoint. And again, standability, stalks, as well as roots. Roots didn't have a really good reason to go digging for moisture earlier this year just because of how much rain we had. And so late root structure would be important to make sure you monitor. And if you do think you're at risk, making sure you get that corn off in a timely way this fall.